Hello and welcome to our sales event with Jennifer Bleam. Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time to do this, to
Thank you
talk
so
through.
much. I'm super excited. This is going to be a ton of fun. I love talking about sales, so I'm excited.
It's such an important part of the process. For those of you who don't know her, Jennifer Bleam is one of the channel's top speakers and thought leaders. She has grown several multi-million-dollar companies, and in 2019, she launched MSP Sales Revolution. To date, Jennifer has coached over 2,000 IT providers on effective sales and marketing to SMB clients. She is the author of the book Simplified Cybersecurity Sales for MSPs, which is available in both print and is now out on Audible as well. We will be giving out 5 copies to a handful of lucky winners after the webinar, so stick with us. I've read it. It's a great read, succinct and to the point. I'd recommend it as an absolute must read for anyone who's selling backup or cybersecurity. Do you want to go ahead and show us a copy, the print copy of the book? Obviously, we're
Yes.
excited about the Audible copy coming out as well.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So I knew it was going to be a great book, and I think the thing that I'm the most proud of is that I've read a ton of sales books, a ton of marketing books, and sometimes they're really great in theory, but it can be sometimes difficult to read them and absorb them and apply them to our very unique business because we've got a very unique business model and we're selling something that's interesting and unique and sometimes hard to articulate the value prop of. And so I was able to take the time to really dig into a lot of trusted sales experts and take their IP and their great knowledge and then apply it to our industry. And that's what I keep hearing is that this is not just a theoretical sales book because there's a lot of theory out there and that's okay. These are like actual from the trenches, real world stories about cybersecurity and about how to position you as a difference maker and your offer as something really valuable. And so, yes, you'll still have to take this and apply it to your business, but at least the scripts are exactly written for this industry and the frameworks are perfect for selling cyber. And so, hopefully, taking that step out of the whole process will make it easier to execute on.
I really appreciate that. One of the things that we talk about, so you've taken this and you've applied it to our industry, but even within our industry, we're selling multiple different things, right? Managed MSPs, you're selling managed services, and you talk about selling managed services or trading dollars for increased productivity and profitability. But selling cybersecurity is more intangible, and so it's different than selling managed services. How do you inject urgency into a conversation and get business owners to act now to protect themselves?
Yeah, and so I love this question. So if there is not urgency, it is because the end user, the decision maker, or the prospect, whatever you want to call them, doesn't really realize how. Obviously, doesn't realize how crucial it is, how urgent it is, and so there is always a little bit of a disconnect between the salesperson. Let's call them an MSP, whether they're the owner or the salesperson, whatever their title is. They're walking in with a very real sense of urgency because we all know it's going to happen if if the prospect keeps doing what they've always done for the last 5 or 10 years and they don't get with the times, then we know that the next call we're going to get from them is going to be it's a breach, it's a ransomware, it's an incident, it's a link that their team shouldn't have clicked and did. And so we all know there's urgency. The challenge and the danger is if we know it's urgent and the prospect doesn't, and we're making the assumption they know how urgent it is, they know why this is important, there's not going to be a sale there. And so I like the question because how do we inject urgency is by simply trying to push them forward in time, trying to get them to experience what they would experience if this happened tonight, if this happened today. So simply questions that help to put them in that frame, in that frame of mind, like what would you do, Mr. Prospect, if you walked in tomorrow morning and you couldn't access any of your data and you couldn't get to your files, you couldn't call, maybe they're an attorney and you're like, how, you couldn't call your clients to give them an update on their case, or you couldn't show up to court because you didn't know you were supposed to. And so helping them take it out of this intangible like downtime and like actually applying it to what does that mean? And then how would that impact you? How would that impact your business development efforts? How would that impact your desire to acquire another client or another company? How would it impact your growth trajectory? How would it impact your reputation in the community? And so just by asking these questions, all of a sudden, this is not just, oh, you're trying to sell me something I don't need, which nobody wants to buy. And instead it's, oh, you're trying to save me from this untimely doom. And I don't want that. I don't want that stress. And I don't want to have to call all of my clients and explain that my IP is now, on the dark web or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And so it's simply questions like, how would it impact you if, are really, really good ways to interject urgency into the conversation.
I love that. I love taking it from downtime, which is just like, yeah, downtime doesn't sound good, but it's also just not very concrete, into the space of the concrete.
Right. And that's one of the things that, especially if it's if the salesperson is a technologist of any type, whether they're a VCISO or maybe in a past life, they were a level 2, level 3, level 1 technician. One of their superpowers is that they make connections very, very quickly. That's why they're able to troubleshoot so well. And I could say, I got this error message, and they immediately make the connection. Oh, that's because you pushed an update or you didn't push an update or whatever. So that ability to make connections very quickly is amazing for them, but they have to slow it down and help the prospect make the connection, because we both hear downtime and we intuitively like cringe and go, my business is dead in the water. But if you say downtime to like an accountant, they're like, I don't really know what that means. Like, it doesn't, like you said, doesn't sound good, but I mean, is it just like my electricity's off for an hour? Like, I'll just go to lunch.
Just go to lunch or take a coffee and then
yes.
Yeah.
And so because we make connections quickly, we make the assumption that our clients and prospects do as well. And that's dangerous. You don't make sales by making assumptions.
Gotcha. Talk me through why you can't promise ROI or bulletproof security with risk mitigation, which is what we're talking about. We're talking about risk mitigation, and how you prove its value instead.
Yeah. All right. So we'll talk about ROI and then we'll talk about bulletproof. And I wrote both of those down, so I make sure to talk about both of them. So like you said, ROI is something that you can promise if all you're selling is what I would call legacy managed services. So maybe you're going to keep them from rebooting their computer, and it takes 20 minutes to reboot the computer because it's old. And so you say, we're going to update your computers and we're going to bring you new computers, and you'll only have to reboot once a week or whatever that is. You can do like a before and after, or an A/B, here's where you are now and here's where you want to be. And the traditional Benjamin Franklin close, like, which one makes more sense to you? Do you want to keep losing hours every day, or do you want to save time? And it becomes a very easy sale for managed services. Security, you are not saving them time. I mean, even if we just talk about something as basic as multi-factor authentication, one of my team members dropped their phone in the middle of the night. She left her charger in the kitchen and was going to the kitchen to get the charger. And in the darkness, she tripped over whatever and dropped her phone, and the screen is shattered. And she's like, yeah, I'll go out and get it taken care of sometime in the next week or two. And I said, like, I don't want to tell you what to do, but just remember, all of our tools are secured with multi-factor authentication at the admin level. So I know that they're all secured. And she's a newer employee. So I'm like, don't forget, like, you're going to get locked out of stuff and you're not going to be able to get in because of your phone. So if you're going to sell multi-factor authentication, which you probably should include that with your bundle, that is not a time savings. Now, I'm not telling you not to do it. In fact, I'm begging you, please do it. But you can't promise ethically and honestly that is going to save them time. And so because it's going to cost them time, it is not an ROI conversation. And so that isn't how you can sell security. So instead, what you're selling is a promised outcome, which you can't promise bulletproof security. We'll get there in a second as well. But at least risk mitigation, that we are reducing the likelihood that you're going to have a breach, or reducing the likelihood of a security incident happening. And then if it does happen, at least we know your network. We have a plan to get you back up and running. We're going to be with you every step of the way. So we're reducing the risk and we're making it less painful if something does happen because we're your partner. So that's the other side of the ROI. If you can't do ROI, at least you're providing risk mitigation.
Okay.
The reason that I beg people not to promise bulletproof security is, first of all, I think there is a maybe a crutch. That may not quite be the right word, but okay, I don't know exactly how to articulate what I do, so I'm going to use this buzzword, and bulletproof sounds really, really good. And so I'm making up for maybe my lack of ability to articulate properly what I'm doing. And I know I can't really explain it away with ROI. So how do I justify the investment with my company? So I'm going to use this really great buzzword that sounds wonderful, like bulletproof. Well, I actually had a client who wanted to rebrand their security solution Bulletproof Security. And thankfully I talked him off a ledge, because I said, well, can you promise bulletproof security? And he's like, well, no. And I said, then why are we going to brand your product that? Like, you can't. It would be like you branding it like, oh, I have a backup solution. Well, are you backing up the data? Well, no, but it sounded good. Yeah, no, let's not do that. So like Comet Backup, you are actually backing up the data. You're not like promising it but not actually delivering it. So that's one thing, is you can't promise bulletproof security. There's no way, short of not having humans on the team, in which case I don't know who we're protecting, all of the robot overlords or whatever it is. You can't promise bulletproof security. That's not a valid promise. So don't make it. And then there's also all kinds of legal reasons that there are more and more times now where MSPs are being called on the carpet because they have promises on their website, regardless of whether it's in their contract or not. It's on the website, and they are being found guilty or negligent or liable because they made promises on their website that they couldn't fulfill on. And so don't use the word bulletproof. Just don't do it.
Don't go there. And that's one of the things I love about your sales philosophy is you kind of talk about, none of us really like that like sleazy sales feel, especially I think if we're coming from the technology side where that's our wheelhouse, that's what we feel good in, and we're not as comfortable with this sales hat.
Yes.
I do think it feels so much better to be authentic and to be truthful. And so that's why I really like the way that you approach this.
It's so funny. I didn't put this in my book because this was like an aha moment after the book got published, and I was just talking shop with a couple of sales trainers, and we started saying, what are all of the ways that people describe salespeople? And like one of those ways is like, oh, he could sell ice to an Eskimo, and that's meant as like a compliment, like, oh, you could sell them something even if they don't need it. And I'm like, that's awful. Like, why would I want to? I could not look myself in the mirror if I was selling someone something that they don't truly need. Like, selling ice to an Eskimo is the epitome of sleazy, slimy sales. I don't want that. And so I'm trying to find, and maybe you know of it, or maybe one of the listeners will know of this. If you do, message me on LinkedIn or Facebook, a good analogy for salespeople. Like, if it's not, oh, she could sell ice to an Eskimo, then what is it? Because too often it's like the used car salesperson. Well, okay, no wonder like none of us really, I mean, I happen to love it, but most people are like, I'm not a salesperson, I'm a business development rep. Like,
Yeah.
Okay, you're a salesperson. Like, we can call it like another word if you want to, but like, you're a salesperson. And so we need like that analogy that's not selling ice to an Eskimo, but like, I don't even know what it would be, but we need that to be like, no, I'm an honest, ethical salesperson, and that actually exists in the world.
One of the things you talk about at the back of your book is you do go over like characteristics of a successful salesperson.
Yes.
Can you talk through like a couple, you give quite a few in the book. And so I'd encourage everyone to go out and get the book, but just like, what are your top ones that you would hit on? Like, this is what I embody. These are the habits and ways that a really good salesperson can upskill and can live in that space successfully.
Yeah. So you just said one, which is habits. And it's so that's that's one of those words that's like discipline that we all know we should do. Like we should be disciplined. But if I look at my week or my month or my quarter, maybe I'm not as disciplined as I wish I would, wish I was. And so some of the sales habits that you should have is setting a goal and measuring to that goal. And like, I don't think that's going to be a light bulb moment. Like, I don't think anyone will say, oh, no one's ever told me I should have goals before. But do you? And are they written down? And do you review them every week at a minimum, maybe even every day? And are you setting up your activities in such a way that you're reverse engineering? So I want to get to this goal, and I know I want to get to that goal. So how do I reverse engineer my habits, my actions, ideally daily, so that I get to that goal? And that's one of those, again, I'm not sure I said anything that someone's like, I never knew that. Like, okay, we all know that, but are we living it? And so the best salespeople, they absolutely live it. And then the other thing I would mention, and I don't recall if this is in the book or not. It's always tough because there's things that they don't make it off the cutting room floor. It's tough. It's like you're cutting off part of your firstborn child or something. It's tough. But companies that have really good sales teams, what they do is they look at their best performers, and they know that that best performer is not doing that by accident. And so they study what is that individual doing that the other people aren't doing as well, or maybe they're not doing at all. And then let's try to clone that person. So I had a job with a vendor in the space, and the same sales rep was the top sales rep 6 years running.
Wow.
And to my knowledge, they never sat down and said, okay, Sally, like, tell me what does your week look like? How do you prospect? How are you following up? What's your follow-up cadence? Are you doing emails or calls or some of both? What do your emails look like? But she was clearly doing something because every system is designed to create the result it's creating. And her system was fantastic. It was the best system in the company. So why would we not study that person and try to emulate that system as much as we can? And so that's one thing. Like if you're a brand new salesperson and you're like, I've never done this before, you should negotiate that your first few weeks on the job, you can do nothing but shadow the most successful salesperson. Don't talk to them, just take notes. I'm going to watch what you're doing. Just pretend like I'm not even here. I'm a fly on the wall. And then you do your best to emulate that successful person, and then you will also be successful.
Yeah, because one of the misconceptions, I have to be honest, I came with before I read your book was that like sales is kind of like an innate skill. Like we all know someone who does sales and they're like, wow, Brian's really good at sales.
Sure.
But the thing I took away from your book really was that you use that word design. This isn't necessarily like inherent to a person. It's something that you can design a process. You talk about in the book about having a debrief checklist, and you give a stat. You say, if you're not closing at least 60% of your sales, then your process is not optimized. And I thought that's such an interesting thing because we talk about optimizing technology all the time. You think about A/B testing, we A/B test, software, iterating, getting better. And yet we don't necessarily apply that or even have formal processes like this is what, and then we're going to test it and we're going to review it and we're going to do it better.
Yes, but we do that on the operations side of things, right? Like we deploy a new backup solution, and the first deployment doesn't always go perfectly. It very rarely goes perfectly. And so you have that after action report or the debrief or the autopsy or whatever you're going to call it, even if it's just you're a solo operator and it's in your head, like you're driving home from the project that went horribly wrong. And you're like, okay, well, now that I know that if they've got a server in the cloud, I need to ask that question. Or now that I know that it plays okay with Macs, but it only if it's this version of operating system, like now and so but you don't know those things if you don't, number one, go through the first time where it's bad, but then you don't improve from there if you don't take a moment to say, okay, what did we learn? What can we do next time so that we learn from our mistakes or learn from our inexperience? And we need to take that skill set that most of your listeners do innately in the operations side and apply it to the sales and marketing side as well.
Yeah, that's one of the things I kind of wanted to ask you about is because the book is specifically geared towards cybersecurity, but I tend to think of backup as kind of sitting in that wheelhouse. And maybe for you it sits in between. I'm not quite sure. I want to explore that with you. But I think of both as providing almost like a form of insurance. And then we could get into a whole nother conversation how you have to have actual insurance to
Yes,
insure
yes.
this. But I'd like to hear from you about how you think about the similarities and the differences of selling backup and selling cybersecurity in the event that I'm selling both, which probably a lot of people are.
Yeah, it's actually extremely similar. So I've been in the industry long enough that I remember when backups went from tape drives, believe it or not, to actually being like what I would now consider a true backup with redundancy in multiple locations and in the cloud, whatever. And so at that time, when that shift happened, when it became, listen, here's a technology that used to only be available to the IBMs of the world and these giant corporations. And now, because technology is better, smaller, faster, leaner, now it's affordable to the general public. And that's why this thing that I sold you 5 years ago is no longer best in class because I mean, let's talk about our phones. Like most of us don't have 5-year-old phones.
Yeah.
Most of our cars we're not driving around with CD players. Like just technology changes quickly, and so it is a very, very similar sale. And in fact, when I first started my company, we would have this exercise where we would walk people through and say, "Do you remember how you used to sell backup?" And they're like, "Oh yeah." They had all this muscle memory around how they would articulate the value of backup, and you know yes, it's probably unlikely that you're going to be hit with a fire, flood, hurricane, but I just had a flood happen last week, not because of the fire department, but because somebody put the sprinkler in the wrong place and it got heated up and it flooded their office. So had the real world story
Yeah.
of a flood, and that's how we would sell backup. So it is very similar. You have to bring the theory down to real life and let them know that there really is a very high likelihood of something happening to them if they don't do anything to mitigate the risk, to reduce the risk, and then also a high likelihood, high impact on their business. So high likelihood and high impact are the two ways that we would always sell backup. And those are the same two things that you need for selling security.
Okay. So pretty much everything that's in your book is going to be applicable to selling backup as well.
Yes. In fact, if we just kind of take a peek behind the curtain, only about a third of the chapters in the book are about cybersecurity. The
Okay.
other two-thirds is just great sales 101 reminders, some 201 level sales.
Mhm.
But I've actually had, because I'm a coach, I have a lot of friends in the digital marketing space and in the coaching space. And I had quite a few of them buy my book just to support me. And they just picked it up and started flipping through it. And they're like, this is a really good book, Jennifer. Like, I don't know anything about
Yeah.
cybersecurity, but like talking about objection handling, like that was super helpful. And so that was a really welcome surprise. And I really just thought it would be all the people in the industry that would
Yeah.
read it and get a ton of value. I did not expect like digital marketers to be like, you should read this book, Bob. Like, it's really good. So 2/3 is just sales. The other third is cybersecurity specific.
Okay. Well, let's jump into that process a little bit because, again, sales can feel a little bit intangible if that's not, if, unlike you, you're not someone who's like reading sales book after sales book after sales
Sure.
book. This is the shortcut to it. So you break this down into different principles. The first principle I want to talk about is, can you give us a quick overview of, you have a 3-step process: reveal the
Yes.
gap, feel the gap, heal the gap. Let's just
That's how I know you read my book because you can tell me that. So, yes. So that is a condensation of the book Gap Selling. Gap Selling is like this really thick book. It's actually one of my favorite books on sales. It's probably my top favorite right
by
now.
Keenan.
Gap Selling by Keenan. I guess he's cool because he only has one name. It used to be he has a first name, but he doesn't go by it
He's in the
anymore.
realm of the Beyoncés and the Adele's and the
Exactly. If you're Beyonce or Madonna, like clearly
Keenan.
you're cool. So he's Keenan. And so I took his book and condensed it down to those three very short. They happen to rhyme. I used to be a teacher, and so I like the little rhymey
I loved
things.
it.
And
Yeah.
so Reveal the gap, feel the gap, heal the gap. So reveal the gap is, we've all kind of heard it, like you're at point A, I need you to be at point B, but the prospect doesn't, they think that point A and point B are like super close to each other. And we're like, oh no, they're like miles apart, like worlds apart. They're on different continents, right? Like, no, your cute little firewall that you bought from the Best Buy is not what I'm going to deploy. And no, we're not going to like pretend to do a backup. Like, we're going to really do a back. And so they're thinking, oh, the problem is here, when we know the problem is like massive. And that's important, because when all I'm doing is solving this tiny little problem, the value is tiny, and
Mm,
therefore the price increase or the
yeah.
investment increase is also going to be tiny. Because, I mean, let's face it, I can bridge that gap with like a band-aid. Like,
Mm,
that's not super valuable. Whereas if it's like this massive, like Grand Canyon sized gap, oh, that's a problem. And there's not a band-aid in the world that can bridge that gap. So revealing where they are now, where they need to be, revealing that where they are now could have significant impact on their business, but where I'm going to take you is to mitigate the risk and be your partner. Revealing that gap has to happen. And then that second phase, or the second piece of the puzzle, is to feel the gap. And there is not a sale in the world that ever happens without emotions being involved. We all make decisions emotionally. And so you have to help the prospect tap into the emotions. And I alluded to this earlier when I said to talk to them about the impact of an outage, or the impact of a cybersecurity incident, the impact of the FBI storming in and stealing all your records, whatever the right word is. I guess not stealing, because they're not yours anymore. They belong to a court of law. And so what would that look like? How would it impact you? How would that impact your team? How would it impact your ability to go home and take care of your family at the end of the night? And instead you're at the office calling your 40 best clients. Like, that's any CEO's worst nightmare. And so feeling that gap is to allow them to internalize, not just logically there's a gap, but emotionally, oh no, this is a gap I've got to fix. And so if you do those two things right, then healing the gap, which is making the sale, healing the gap becomes very easy. If you do the other two things right, the healing the gap is simply a recap statement and a request to move forward. So it's like, you told me
next
you were
step.
here, this isn't okay. We agreed this is really what you need. You understand the investment is this. You said that, it was something that was tenable, maybe a little more than you were expecting, but you've got that budgeted, and you're willing to invest that because you don't want all of the bad stuff that's going to happen if you stay here. So I really just have one question. Can we partner together on this? I would love to. And so
Yeah.
literally that's your close, is simply saying, can I help you? Can I help you move from A to B? Can I help you mitigate this risk? Can I help you remove the challenges that we've talked about?
Yeah. And one of the things that I really took away from your book is the discovery process. You write the discovery is the most important and misunderstood and marginalized part of the sales process. What
Yes.
should people know about discovery? Who is discovery for, and why is it such a vital step in the process?
Yeah, if your listeners walk away with nothing else, I would love for them to walk away with this. Discovery is not for the salesperson. Discovery is for the prospect. Because the salesperson, if they've been in this industry for more than a year or two, and many of them have been in the industry for a decade or two,
Mm,
they're not going to learn anything. They're not going to discover a single thing. Let me back up. 99% of the time, they're not going to discover a single thing. There's always like that one crazy story, and almost everybody has like the one crazy story. But largely speaking, we all know there's going to be some mysterious server that just nobody knew existed, or there's going to be a random, I don't know, workstation. It's the receptionist workstation that doesn't have antivirus on it, or like whatever. Like, there's all these very standard things that when we're in the sales process, we have to go, oh, that's really concerning. Like, you and half the world have an extra server. Like, who has extra servers? They don't just appear. They don't, like, in the middle of the night. We had one server yesterday. Now we have two. No, like, it came from somewhere. Someone bought it. And yet that's going to happen all the time in your sales calls. So the salesperson isn't going to discover anything. But if you do it right, the prospect will discover a lot. So it kind of ties in with that, moving them from point A to point B.
It's being on the journey with them. It's kind of seeing it from their perspective rather than from your perspective, really. That
correct.
Putting yourself in their shoes.
Yes. Because again, if you just walk in, you're like, hey, I'm pretty sure there's an extra server and you probably have a workstation that's not protected. I can help you. You have 10 computers. That'll be $2,000 a month. Are we good? No, we're not good.
Like, yeah, that's not.
Yeah, so helping, understanding that your prospect is not seeing eye to eye with you, and your job is to ask really open-ended questions. Again, something that every sales trainer talks about, but the end goal of those questions is to help the prospect go, oh, I don't know the answer to that, but I probably should, or I'm giving you an answer that I don't like, and you're probably going to tell me that I shouldn't be doing it that way, but that's the reality. And I never, like last night when I went to sleep, I was sleeping like a baby and everything's great. And now I'm kind of uncomfortable because you just asked really good questions to help me realize how underprotected I am. And now I'm not going to sleep really well tonight unless I find a solution, which might be you. And so that's what you're trying to do, is help the prospect take the blinders off and realize the reality of their situation.
Can you jump in on that topic? I kind of just want to double click on that with you and say, what, like literally, what is a question that, like, let's role play here. If you're selling backup, what is a question that you would ask in the discovery phase, or what are a few of the questions you would ask to try to get the response you want?
Yeah, of course. So I would ask questions like, it's going to be a little bit situational dependent, right? Do they have a backup now? Is it backing up all of the data? But let's kind of make the assumption that they have a backup now, but nobody's monitoring it, and it really hasn't run correctly. And so we have a swath of data that is a year old. It probably could be a whole lot worse than that, but let's just go with that. So let me ask you, what would that look like if you came in tomorrow and you'd gotten struck by lightning? Like, it happens, it's storm season, totally making this up. Don't do that if it isn't storm season, right? Because they'll call you on it. But and you got struck by lightning, and all of that data that was in your marketing and sales folder is gone. Like, because that's what hasn't been getting backed up, is your marketing and sales data. So let me ask you first, what was in there? Like what is in there, right? Because we didn't have a lightning strike, but what's in there? What kind of documents are in there?
I have, everything I need to run my marketing on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. So so I'm going to force you to bring it out of the theory, right? So I'm like, I want to get a little more tangible than that, because if I lose everything, that's a little bit different from, my spreadsheets,
okay, so I would lose my budget spreadsheet. I would lose
probably like some commission stuff.
Yeah.
Do you have like, are you running digital ads right now?
Yeah, and my campaign planning, literally my digital assets, like the physical ads uploaded, which we paid a lot of money from the graphic designer for.
Yeah. So all right. So we've got marketing that's kind of dead in the water, hard to get restarted because like you're going to have to recreate those assets. So what does that do to your department? Like, are you going to make goal this quarter? Are you going to make goal next quarter?
No, we'd look really bad to the leadership team. That would really take us out. And if I
got it
without my budget and stuff,
So then so I'm going to dig in. I'm trying to like go in and out of role play. So I'm going to dig a little bit and be like, so what's going to happen if you don't meet budget? Okay, got it. So don't have access to stuff. You're not going to meet numbers. You're looking bad to leadership. So then you don't meet your numbers. What is that going to do to like your hiring plans for Q1, Q2?
Yeah, that would put things on hold. I'd have to rewrite all those job adverts. I mean, that's like a half day, maybe even a full day excursion for me,
Like, are you still going to get the funding? Like, how many people were you planning to hire in Q1?
Yeah, if I'm planning to hire several people and I can't project my budgets. I can't show it. That's true. I hadn't even thought about that. Yeah.
So all of a sudden we've taken this from, oh, you lost your sales and marketing folder to now you're not hiring 3 people in January. Right. So we took it from this, okay, I guess it's not ideal that my sales and marketing folder isn't being backed up. We picked sales and marketing, like it could have been finance, it could have been whatever. And by the way, you did a great role play. But okay, oh, that would be bad. And that's what everybody says. Oh, that would be bad. Okay, but like specifically, what is in there? What spreadsheets? What? And we could have said spreadsheets. What PowerPoint decks are in there? What do you have any QuickBooks files in there that
really
are
drilling down
sales and marketing? Yeah, so really drill down until you can tell that the person's like, oh, like I don't know, I literally open that folder every day and I don't really even think about what's in there, but like it's my whole 9 to 5 world is in there. And
you put me in the like, oh my gosh, I'm in the boardroom. I'm unprepared. I don't have my stuff in front of like now I'm like
getting chills, like just thinking about it. And it's not even my backup that's not running. Right. And so then we take it from, oh, that would be bad to, okay, but specifically what's in there? And then what's the impact of that? So the impact is I can't open my files. Okay, fine. But the impact is really, I'm going to look bad to my team. I'm going to look bad to the executive team. And then the impact of the impact is I'm going to lose 3 staff members in January that I'm not going to be able to hire because we've been kind of rolling along, kind of rolling the snowball, and we're all a little bit short staffed right now, but we've all been like, yeah, but come February 15th, man, we're great. We're all going to take our vacations in March. And now all of that's gone.
Yeah.
And so we took it from the theoretical, oh, we've got some backups that aren't running, to what's the impact to the company? And like, that's a completely different conversation.
And you talk about how like, because you might have to have this pitch several times. Like it might not just be with one decision maker. It might be, you have a table full of people and you have to run each person through like, how does this impact you? How does this impact the CFO? How does this impact the CEO? How does this impact, exactly the marketing executive and this person and that person? And so it's being able to like get into each of these people's worlds and make them really in their body, like you said, feel the emotion of that.
Yes, because there's this sales rule. And I mean, I'm sure that, again, rules are made to be broken, but there's a sales rule that if you don't give everyone at the boardroom, around that boardroom table, if you don't give every one of them 3 reasons to buy from you, then you may not make the sale. Now, if it's only 1 or 2, I'm not saying you're dead in the water, but imagine if the sales and marketing executive is like, I don't care about the finance person, but I'm going, which 3 roles would I not? Oh man, like I really need the content manager, and I really need I don't know, I need that videography. And they're now trying to figure out how to weasel out of this horrible situation. Can you talk to the CFO for a few minutes? I'm still trying to figure this out. And you're like, well, the good news is when you partner with us, we're going to mitigate that risk so that you don't have to redo your whole org chart. Like the whole goal is to make sure that this doesn't happen. So now you've added tremendous value to their world, because remember, last night they went to bed sleeping like a baby because they thought they'd come in tomorrow and be able to double click the sales and marketing folder and it would open up like normal. And now they're like, oh no, I could have come in this morning and double clicked and there would have been nothing there, or it would have thrown an error. It would have, whatever would have happened. And now they're living in the future state that they don't want.
And that's how you sell it. Yeah.
And that's how you sell it. Yep.
Yeah. Yep. You're a big proponent of telling a story, and we kind of went on that a little bit with this, but can you give me one more example, or maybe a couple of short examples of how, like, stories you keep up your sleeve? Because this is showing the impact on me, but another way to demonstrate it would be through telling a story.
Yeah. So this is honestly, if I had like 6 months to do nothing, I would probably study storytelling, because it's such a powerful, it's like stories are, there's something just about stories. Like the hormones that are dropped when you tell a story automatically makes the hearer trust you and like you. And so, storytelling as just a broad mechanism, super powerful. So love this concept. some good stories are the ones that are in the news. Like, hey, did you hear about so and so that got breached? Yeah, like they've been dead in the water for 3 weeks, so that's technically a story. Or listen, I gotta tell you, I talked to a company just like yours. You've got 17 employees in the medical world. They had about 20 across town, but very similar. Like you're in pediatrics and they're in adolescent medicine, and they brought us in because they were just having some weird pop-ups and stuff. And man, when we got in, it was a whole lot worse than they realized. And it was bad, and they brought us in, and they adopted our whole solution, and we got it in the nick of time, because there were some actually bad guys in their network, and we were able to uncover it and make sure that as far as we could tell, the data didn't leak. But man, it was like touch and go there for a while. And I mean, they've been with us for 6 months. Things are good. We're fine. But yeah, like it happens to companies just like you. So
because you're big on that. It's like I've heard of the pipeline going down. I've heard of the government got hacked, whatever, and we think, or at least the layperson thinks, like it only happens to like large corporations, and that's probably not who your clients are. You're probably not servicing the IBMs and the Googles of the world. They're doing like, so your people it needs to be local. It needs to be relatable. And there's kind of two ways to do that. And you just demonstrated both of them. One is to like, here's the success story. And then the other way is like, oh my gosh, here's how it went wrong. Like I've heard of it going bad.
Right. Exactly. Yep. And another kind of a secret trick is that if you're going into a prospect and it's an industry that has trade publications or magazines, is to do a Google search on that. So like manufacturing hack, or manufacturing cybersecurity best practices, or manufacturing cybersecurity, manufacturing ransomware, and just spend 15 minutes. I don't mean like, make this an 8-hour research project, but just go maybe 3 pages deep in Google for each of those searches and just see what comes up. Or manufacturing cybersecurity, or manufacturing ransomware, and then add your town or your state and just see what comes up. You won't always strike gold. Sometimes you will absolutely strike gold, and you'll be like, man, did you hear about this? And they're like, yeah, our trade publication has been talking about them. Like, man, it would stink to be them. And you're like, so do you know how it happened? Because you are doing the same things they were doing. We got to fix this, because it's just luck of the draw, and it's amazing that it hasn't happened to you yet. We got to fix this, because I don't want you to be the next headline that your companies, right, your trade publications talking about you. Like, let's keep that from happening if we can.
Yeah. One of the other mistakes people make is that they talk about benefits rather than features. Why shouldn't people do that? Or what's the difference there?
Yeah, so you always want to talk about the benefit, because that's what's in it for me, right? From the mind of the prospect. So a feature it's the things that we all rattle off when we're talking to our colleagues. Like I've got MDR, XDR, EDR, SIM source, SOC, backup, like all the buzzwords. Like that's what you. Yeah, it's all the acronyms, like it's all the buzzwords in the industry, right? And that's what your solution stack is built on. But for every single one of those, there is a so what. And so like if a geek was pitching to me, a technologist was pitching to me, and they're like, well, you need EDR. And I'm like, so what? Like, well, I have the best EDR in the world. What does that mean to me? Like, why do I care? Why do I want the best backup? And we just kind of walk through that scenario. But like, why do I care about SimSoc SOAR? Like, I don't even know what those things mean. Years ago, MSPs were pitching SOC, and they would look at their prospect's notes, and the prospect had written SOCK. They didn't know, right? I mean, we're quite there right now, but that's the level of unfamiliarity that your prospects have with this. So you don't necessarily need to say you need a SOC and the benefit of that is this, but you should say you need to meet with X standard, and here's why. And so your trick to make sure that you're not talking about features, and then instead you're talking about benefits, is if you have to say so that blank, or you're going to want to make sure you have this because, And it's the because part or the so that part that's the benefit. That's the benefit statement that you want to give every single time. You may not even need to give the feature. You may not have to say machine learning or AI driven, because like, what does that really mean? Like, what does that mean to me? Like, okay, it's the latest, greatest, but is there really a difference between machine learning and AI? Well, like, yes, there is, but does the end user care about it? Probably not. And so that's not a selling point.
Yeah. Kind of bringing us to the end of the process here, there's a false belief that closing is the most important part of the sales process. Can you debunk that myth for me?
Okay, so yes, I can. So it's kind of like the game of American football. Like American football, we measure the success or failure of a team based on whether or not the quarterback throws, and we get a score, right? So we have to measure based on that. We have to have a score, and so closing the sale is the score. But if I was coaching an NFL team, whether we won or lost, it's Monday morning, and I'm doing a Google search, or maybe I'm pulling out the biggest football book that I have, and my question is, how do I score more touchdowns? I would argue that's the wrong question, because a touchdown is not, it's not this, it doesn't live in a vacuum. Instead, you have to say, how do I keep the quarterback protected? How do I get the quarterback to know when to run versus when to pass? How do I get the quarterback to pass further, more accurately? How do we get, one more yard every play? Like it's all of these micro pieces that all lead towards getting more points on the scoreboard. And so if we relate that to sales, it is, of course, we have to score based on something. So we're adding monthly recurring revenue, we're adding net new logos. So that's the goal. That's what we all want, like, right? Salespeople that are adding to our book of business. But the Google search should not be, how do I close more sales? It should be, how do I demonstrate the impact of a cybersecurity incident better? How do I ask more open-ended questions? How do I talk less? Because as salespeople, we're only supposed to talk 30% of the time. So how do I talk less and still make the sale? That's probably worthy of 10 or 20 hours worth of study and work right there. And so when we study the micro pieces that lead us towards the sale, then we make more sales. But it isn't, let me do a quick Google search on how to close more sales, because the close, it should really just be this natural part of having a leading conversation, having a very open-ended conversation, and it just should naturally happen. It shouldn't be this forced thing that, okay, here we are, we're at the closing conversation, so can we do business together? Like that's not the way it works in real life. And I kind of quibble a little bit. I'm Sandler trained. I love the Sandler method, but I really have this problem with like, as if we like close the door on the first piece of the puzzle, and now we're in the second compartment, and we close the door, and when we magically close another doors at the end, and all these things are like these micro elements. That's not the way it works. There's a lot of ebb and flow that has to happen naturally. And when you have enough need, you've demonstrated that there's a gap, you've helped them to feel the chills of what would happen if you couldn't open your sales and marketing folder tomorrow morning. And now it's like, well, I would love to help these things never happen to you, or at least significantly reduce the risk that they could happen. Can we do business together? Can we partner together on making this a reality for your company? And so it really should be a natural conclusion of a sales process well played.
In some ways, it kind of takes the pressure off you as a salesperson, because you're not trying to be amazing at this one sort of magical, mythical skill.
Yes.
It's like in the realm of like the human, and something that's achievable and possible is because you're getting better at all these different parts of the process, and then naturally it will come together at the end.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then it becomes a little bit more fun, because you can say, you know what, I'm really not good at that beginning chit chat, create a relationship thing. And I bet because I'm not creating a whole lot of relationship, I'm not hearing objections. because they don't really trust me and they don't feel comfortable asking me or voicing an objection. So now I get to the end and I have all these stalled deals and everybody's saying, I need to think about it. I'll let you know. And I have this bloated bottom of the pipeline and nobody's saying yes. And I wonder, instead of saying, how do I get more people to say yes? How do I get more people to say yes? It could be the very beginning part of your sales process is what you need to work on. Maybe you need to get them to open up a little bit. Maybe you like, I don't love chit chat, but I know most people do. And so I do it in a sales call because I know that that's what's required to get to the end and get the result that I want.
Yeah.
And so by breaking it down into these little components, there's going to naturally be an area that you're strong in that I want you to make even stronger. And then there's probably an area that we all really stink at. And let's try to elevate that just a little bit. And it's those small moves that are going to allow that close to just naturally happen.
Yeah, that makes total sense. We have had the majority of this conversation from the point of view of someone who's like an MSP or an IT provider. But the reality of most people's careers, unless perhaps you're maybe a business owner, is that as a tech or whoever, you might be jumping between internal and like an internal IT team and then an MSP environment. So let's just take just a moment to kind of jump into that internal IT team environment where, in a sense, you're still doing sales because you still have to convince your leadership team that you need these things. Can you speak to that person who's not selling to an external client? And again, what are kind of the similarities and differences? I would imagine a lot of it's the same. A lot of the techniques can be applied. Are there any things that are slightly different that you'd like to address?
So let's start with the similarities. What we talked about at the very beginning, where are we now and where are we trying to get to? That is the classic sales process. And so if you're an internal IT team and you're trying to get, let's say, a budget approved, or you're trying to get a new backup solution approved, or you want to, let's keep doing what we're doing, but let's bring in somebody else to co-manage the stuff we're not good at or don't have the staffing to do. Here's where we are now. And if we keep doing business like we've been doing for the last 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, here's what could happen to us. And here's why this isn't best practice. And so could we look at something that would deliver this result? And so we're revealing the gap. That's exactly what we did at the beginning, was revealing the gap. The feeling the gap is going to be a little bit different. You still do need to always engage the emotions, but it's not going to have quite the same impact as you're selling to a CEO and this is like their dream that they have poured everything into for the last 30 or 40 years. Mm-hmm. That's going to be a little bit different than if you're talking to an executive who has to approve the budget, but they're still going to have emotions tied up because they want to make good decisions. They want to appear intelligent when they go to their higher ups and ask for the budget. And so just make sure that you're taking that into effect, into account, and having that conversation. And so the feeling of the gap needs to be there, but it'll be a little bit different. And then the healing of the gap is very important because you're walking into a sales interaction. And it is a sales interaction if you're asking for budget, but the sale might be getting a commitment that your supervisor agrees with you and they're going to go to bat and try to get that budget approved. Well, that's you've made the sale then, because you probably aren't going to take this all the way up to the CFO. And so just like everybody who is in a sales role, whether you're a technologist or a true salesperson, when you're walking into a sales interaction, you need to know what is that end result. What does success look like? It's just like a marketing campaign. Like, how are we going to measure success? And so success might be, I'm going to get this person to agree that what we're doing is not okay and that something needs to change, and that this idea is okay as long as the budget is X or less. That's a sale. Even though you didn't get the sale, you don't get the signature today, you closed that person on pushing it forward.
And so you might not have the title as like a salesperson, but you still have to kind of engage in that process.
Yes.
So it's important to understand how to do that.
Yep. And I have a couple of friends in the channel that will come to me and say, I really want to get this new software tool, and I work for X vendor, and I need to go get this approval from the CEO. How should I do this? And I'm like, well, where are you now? Where are you trying to get to? Why is what you're doing now not okay? What's going to be the negative impact if you stay there? What's going to be the positive impact if you move? It's the same process. Like that's why I said like 2/3 of the book is sales. It's salesmanship. It's not cybersecurity specific.
Absolutely. I want to target in on one more specific group, if you will. In March of this year, CIO reported that women are disproportionately missing out on the ongoing boom in IT jobs. The introduction to your book speaks about how it took you a while to find your footing and thrive in your career. What advice specifically do you have for women or people from minority backgrounds who want to, they're either at the beginning of their career or they want to like step up, level up?
Yeah, so let me speak to the women specifically, just because I don't have a world. I don't feel like I can speak well to the minorities necessarily. Although I think the advice is probably valid, I just wouldn't be comfortable promising that it's valid. But for women, I don't fully understand it. I've done a little bit of study into it, but we unless we are feeling 100% or maybe 110% qualified for a role, we will not throw our name in the hat. We will not put our resume in. And conversely, men are very confident in their ability to figure things out, and they kind of believe, well, maybe the job was overinflated, and because I have 60% of the qualifications, I'm going to throw my name in the hat. So my advice to women, whether they're an executive looking for another role, they're a CEO growing their company, is to step into your greatness. Like I think as women, we tend to look down on ourselves. We tend to have this negative self-talk, and we talk ourselves out of things, and we're hyper analytical, and
we're really hard on ourselves.
We are so hard on ourselves. I mean, that's why a lot of women surround themselves with great women. Like I have women in my life that'll politely, sometimes not so politely, slap me around and say, you are holding yourself back. Like you are your own worst enemy. Go out there and make it happen. Yeah. So I'm channeling my friends now. And that would be my advice. There is something about I think each of us has something inside of ourselves. I'm a great salesperson, I'm a great coach, but every one of us has something special inside of ourselves. So don't hold it back. Like, don't be afraid to just let it shine and step into that greatness. Like, it is who you are anyway. So it's almost like it's fighting to be let out. Don't hold it down. Like, don't suppress it. Just let it shine, be who you are. There's literally one of you in the world, and be you. Like, the world needs you, or you wouldn't have been created in the first place. So step into your greatness, just be amazing. That would be my advice.
That's such a positive note to end on. I want to ask you one last thing. To close things out, can you leave our audience with a challenge? What's an actionable step that they can take today to improve their sales process and their sales pitches?
So you mentioned it earlier, which is the sales debrief. Whether you call it a debrief or an autopsy, we mentioned it in relation to operations and kind of going back and looking at a project that went wrong. I would challenge you to think back to one of your most recent sales calls, whether that was earlier today or last month. Think back on it, and I want you to identify one thing that you did well. And I'm going to start with the positive. Think of one thing that you did well that you're like, you know what? I articulated that value proposition really well. Or, you know what? They threw an objection at me, and I didn't tense. Like, I didn't feel my body tensing up, and I didn't go, oh, great job. You messed this one up. You lost the sale. Like, no, I really diffused that objection really well. So identify something you did well, and then identify at least one thing that you're committed and I use that word on purpose, that you're committed to improving and doing differently in your next sales interaction. And if you do those two things after every sales call, you can't help but get better every time, because you know that you're going to be debriefing tonight and you don't want to have to say, wow, I made that same mistake twice. Instead, you want to make new mistakes. And that's how you just incrementally get better every single time you go on a sales call.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Thank you to our audience for joining us. There were so much great things that we learned here. I learned so many things. I would recommend that everyone pick up a copy of Jennifer's book, Simplified Cybersecurity, Sales for MSPs. You can get a copy in print, a digital copy, or you can now listen on Audible, which is really exciting for people like me who like to listen while we're doing the dishes and laundry and things like that. Jennifer also has a Facebook group, MSP Sales Revolution. I get a lot out of the discussions on your Facebook group. I'm always poking around in there, seeing what people have to say. So head into that community, see what's going on there. There's a lot to be learned. And then if you're really inspired by this session and you want to do more, Jennifer runs a personalized mentoring business. And so her website is mspsalesrevolution.com. So those are some ways that you can connect with Jennifer. We also obviously hope that you will check out Comet Backup. We really appreciate your time talking to our audience, upskilling everyone. This has been amazing. Thank you so much, Jennifer.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. This is a lot of fun.
And final thing to kind of housekeeping, close everything out, we will be emailing 5 people, 5 lucky winners, who we will be sending you a copy of Jennifer's book. So that's a fantastic thing to close on. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Jennifer.
Take care.
Bye.